The water hit her face before she could even turn around. Not spilled, not accidentally knocked over. Poured. Deliberately, slowly, from a glass held at shoulder height by a man who was already laughing before it landed. The lobby of the Hartwell Grand went completely silent. Not the polite hush that falls when someone drops a tray, or the brief pause when a child starts crying near the concierge desk. This was a different kind of silence, the kind that happens when everyone in a room simultaneously realizes they are witnessing something they cannot unhear, cannot unsee, and will absolutely be asked about later. Celestine Okafor did not move. She stood at the front desk of one of Chicago's most celebrated hotels with sparkling water dripping from her temple, tracing a slow line down the left side of her face, soaking into the collar of her cream linen jacket. Her hands remained at her sides. Her expression did not change. She did not reach for a napkin. She did not step back. She simply stood there, very still, very quiet, and looked at the man who had done it. His name was Preston Whitmore, 53 years old, founder of a regional investment firm based in Atlanta. The kind of man who had a nickname for his accountant and flew first class on routes short enough that most people drove. He was wearing a sport coat over an open-collar shirt, the specific combination that says, "I am important enough that I stopped trying to look like it," and he was holding the now empty glass loosely at his side, still smiling. The way people smile when they believe consequences are things that happen to other people. "I asked for still," he said to no one in particular. That's what happens when you send a girl to do a job. He had not sent Celestine anywhere. She had not been sent. She was standing at the check-in desk because she had walked up to the check-in desk, the same as anyone else, and the interaction that had led to a glass of sparkling water being poured on her head had begun approximately 4 minutes earlier and had nothing to do with water at all. It had begun with a room. Celestine Okafor had arrived at the Hartwell Grand on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, the kind of Chicago afternoon where the sky can't decide between blue and gray and settles into a color that isn't really either. She had one carry-on bag. She had a reservation. She had flown in from D.C. that morning for a 2-night stay before a series of meetings she'd been building toward for the better part of 8 months. She was 61 years old. She wore her silver hair, natural, close-cropped, which she had done since her late 40s and which still startled people who expected something else. She was tall, unhurried in her movements, and had the particular kind of presence that doesn't announce itself loudly, but is somehow always noticed, the way a very old, very large tree is noticed when you're walking through a forest. The front desk was staffed that afternoon by a young man named Kevin, who was professional and efficient and completely overwhelmed, because Preston Whitmore had been standing at that desk for 11 minutes before Celestine arrived. And Preston Whitmore was not a man who responded well to being told something he didn't want to hear. What he didn't want to hear was that his room wasn't ready. "I booked a suite," Whitmore was saying, as Celestine rolled her bag to the adjacent check-in terminal. "I didn't book the floor below the suite. I didn't book the room that is adjacent to the suite. I booked the suite on the 14th floor, facing the lake, and what I am hearing from you is that this suite is not currently available, which I have to tell you is going to be a significant problem." Kevin was explaining, patiently, that the suite was undergoing a minor maintenance issue that would be resolved within the hour, and that Mr. Whitmore had been upgraded to a comparable room in the interim, and that the hotel deeply— "I don't want a comparable room," Whitmore said. "I want my room. I'm at this hotel 4 times a year. Do you know how many points I have with this chain? Do you know who handles our corporate travel account?" Celestine had heard variations of this speech before. Most people who worked in hospitality had. She waited at her terminal while a second front desk associate, a woman named Dara, pulled up her reservation. "Miss Okafor," Dara said, smiling. "Welcome back. We have you in. Excuse me." Whitmore turned from Kevin to Dara, bypassing Celestine entirely. "I've been waiting here for almost 15 minutes. I'd like someone to help me." Dara glanced at Kevin. Kevin glanced at his screen. "Sir," Dara said, "my colleague Kevin is helping you. I'm checking in another guest." Whitmore looked at Celestine then, not to acknowledge her, not to apologize. He He looked at her the way some people look at furniture, assessing whether it's in the way. "She can wait," he said. "I'm a Diamond Preferred member. I've been standing here since. I've been standing here since before you," Celestine said. She said it without heat, simply accurately, the way you'd correct a minor factual error in a report. She had been at the adjacent terminal for nearly 2 minutes before Whitmore had turned around. She had been there. She had been seen. She simply had not been worth interrupting his grievance for. Whitmore blinked. It was clear he had not expected her to speak. People with his particular brand of certainty rarely do. They've built their whole operating system on the assumption that not everyone in a room counts equally, and when someone they've discounted responds, there's always that brief, confused pause, like a calculator receiving an input it wasn't designed to handle. "I'm sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Do you work here?" "No," Celestine said. "Then I'm not sure why you're—" "I'm a guest," she said, "checking in, same as you." The lobby was busy enough that this exchange was not, by itself, remarkable. 2 guests at a hotel desk, a minor friction, the kind that gets smoothed over and forgotten before you've reached your room. Dara was already typing. Kevin had returned to his screen. A bellman was crossing the lobby with a cart. It might have ended there. It didn't end there, because Preston Whitmore picked up his sparkling water, a glass he'd been given while waiting, which was already mostly gone. And he looked at Celestine Okafor with an expression she recognized immediately, the expression that certain men wear when a woman has said something accurate that they didn't give her permission to say, and he upended the rest of the glass over her head. "Cool off," he said. The lobby went silent. Celestine stood with water on her face and did not move for a moment. 1 second. 2. The kind of stillness that isn't shock. It was something else, something slower and more deliberate, the way an extremely still body of water is not calm, but simply very, very deep. Then she reached into her bag, retrieved a folded handkerchief, actual linen, her late mother's habit, one she'd inherited, and she pressed it once, carefully, against her temple. She did not look at Whitmore again. She turned to Dara. "I'd like to speak with the general manager," she said. "When you have a moment." Dara was already reaching for the phone. Kevin had gone the color of fresh concrete. Whitmore, apparently unaware that the temperature in the room had shifted in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, set his empty glass down on the counter. "Someone's going to want to look at that maintenance situation," he said. "I'll be in the bar." He walked away. A few people in the lobby watched him go. Nobody said anything. A woman near the elevator caught Celestine's eye and shook her head. Not dramatically, just briefly, the small, exhausted acknowledgement of someone who has seen this before. The general manager's name was Philip Mercer, and he arrived at the front desk in under 3 minutes, which was either a coincidence of scheduling or, as Celestine suspected, a function of whatever Dara had said into the phone, because Philip Mercer arrived looking like a man who had been walking quickly and was now working very hard to appear as though he had not been. "Mrs. Okafor," he said, and the way he said her name told her he knew exactly who she was. "I am so sorry. I was just informed." "It's all right, Philip," she said. He looked at her carefully. He had worked in hospitality for 22 years. He knew what "it's all right" meant and what it did not mean, and he knew enough to understand that in this particular case, coming from this particular woman, it meant not now, not here, not in the middle of your lobby, while he's still in the building. "Can I have someone bring your bag up?" he said. "That would be lovely," she said. She followed Philip to the elevator. On the way, she stopped at the concierge desk and asked for the name of a good dry cleaner nearby that could handle linen quickly. The concierge gave her 3 options, all within 4 blocks, all excellent. She thanked him by name. When the elevator doors closed, Philip Mercer exhaled slowly. "Miss Okafor," he started. "I know you have a difficult situation here," she said. "He's a corporate account." Philip said nothing, which was answer enough. "I'm not asking you to do anything tonight," she said. "I just wanted you to know I was here, and I saw it, and I imagine your cameras saw it too." She looked at the floor numbers ticking upward. "Document everything," she said. "That's all I'm asking for right now." Philip nodded. He had the look of a man who had just been extended a mercy he wasn't entirely sure he deserved. Up in the room, not comparable, the actual suite, the one facing the lake, which had apparently resolved its maintenance issue with remarkable speed. Celestine Okafor called her assistant. Her assistant's name was Marcus Webb, and he had worked with her for 11 years, which meant he was accustomed to receiving phone calls that began with unusual information delivered in a very even tone. "A man poured a glass of water on me in the lobby of the Hartwell," she said. A pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Linen jacket will need cleaning. Do you want me to?" "Pull everything we have on a Preston Whitmore. Investment firm out of Atlanta, probably 15 to 20 employees. Been a corporate client of this hotel for what sounds like several years." She set her phone on speaker and began unpacking her carry-on. "Just background for now. I want to know who he is when he's not yelling at front desk staff." "On it," Marcus said. "Celestine." "I know," she said. "You always say that, and I'm always right." She hung up and stood at the window for a moment, looking at the lake. Late afternoon light was doing something interesting across the surface of the water, pulling it bronze and silver in alternating layers. She had a dinner in 2 hours. She had calls in the morning. She had the thing she'd been building for 8 months, which she was not going to let a man with a sparkling water and a sport coat dismantle from the outside in. She ordered room service. She made notes. She read through the materials for the next morning's meeting, which concerned a hospitality portfolio that she had been quietly assembling for the better part of a decade, and which, when the last signature landed in 36 hours, would make her the majority owner of a hotel management group comprising 22 properties across 11 states. The Hartwell Grand was not one of those 22 properties. It was going to be the 23rd. She had not mentioned this to Philip Mercer. She had not mentioned it to Dara. She had not mentioned it to anyone in this building, because that was not how she operated. She had not gotten to where she was by announcing herself. She got there by watching and listening and knowing when the right moment was, and the right moment was not a hotel lobby with sparkling water drying on her collar. The right moment was coming, though. It was about 36 hours away. Preston Whitmore spent Tuesday night at the hotel bar explaining to a man he'd met 40 minutes earlier why the service industry had declined catastrophically in the last decade. He had strong feelings on this subject. He had strong feelings on most subjects. The man he was talking to nodded periodically and ordered a second drink and mostly waited for Whitmore to pause long enough that departure became socially viable. Wednesday passed without incident. Whitmore had his meetings. Celestine had hers. They did not cross paths. The hotel is large enough for that kind of parallel existence, 2 people sharing the same building, the same elevators, the same breakfast service, without ever occupying the same moment. Wednesday evening, Marcus Webb sent Celestine a file. She read it in the chair by the window. Preston Whitmore, 53, founder and sole principal of Whitmore Capital Advisors, 17 employees, client base concentrated in mid-tier regional commercial real estate. Revenue had been declining for the past 3 years, which was not unusual in the current market, but was more pronounced in his case, partly because 2 of his largest clients had moved to competing firms in the past 18 months. He had a profile in a regional business journal from 4 years ago, in which he described his management philosophy as decisive and results-oriented, and mentioned that he played golf and didn't read fiction. His corporate travel account with this hotel chain was real, though smaller than he'd implied. He stayed at properties in this group 6 or 7 times a year, usually in markets where his clients were located. Celestine closed the file. She thought about the woman near the elevator who had shaken her head. She thought about Kevin at the front desk, who had looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. She thought about Dara, who had reached for the phone immediately, and about what it costs a person to do their job in the presence of someone who treats them as an obstacle. She thought about those things for a while. Then she went to sleep because she had the most important morning of the past 8 months waiting for her, and she was not, under any circumstances, going to arrive at it tired. The signing happened in a conference room on the 22nd floor of a building 6 blocks from the hotel. Celestine sat at one end of a long table. Across from her were 3 attorneys, 2 financial representatives, and a woman named Greta Haas, who had founded the hotel management group 40 years ago and was now, at 81, ready to let someone else carry it. Greta Haas had spent 2 years vetting potential buyers before she arrived at Celestine Okafor. The vetting had been thorough and, by several accounts, alarming. Greta did not ask the questions that most sellers asked, and she cared about different things than most sellers cared about. And when she had finally agreed to a meeting with Celestine, she had spent the first 40 minutes asking about Celestine's relationship with her frontline employees rather than her returns. They had gotten along immediately. The signing took 2 hours, because documents of this kind always take 2 hours, regardless of how prepared everyone is. Celestine signed where she was asked to sign. She answered the questions that needed answering. She shook hands around the table when it was done, and then she hugged Greta Haas, which was not a thing she typically did in professional settings. And Greta hugged her back with the grip of a woman who had been in the industry for 4 decades and still had the handshake of a former athlete. "Take care of my people," Greta said. "That's the plan," Celestine said. She walked back to the hotel in the afternoon light. It was a good day for it, clear and cold, the lake visible in the gaps between buildings, doing its particular thing where it looks completely different every few hours, like it's not sure what it wants to be. Celestine had always liked that about Lake Michigan. It reminded her of herself at various ages. She stopped by the front desk when she got back. Dara was there. Kevin was there. A third associate she hadn't met was handling a line of new arrivals. The lobby was full in the particular midweek way of business hotels. Rolling luggage, people on phones, someone in a suit looking at their watch. "Is Philip available?" Celestine asked Dara. Dara looked at her. Something in her expression shifted. Not alarm, not suspicion, just that particular awareness that had been there since Tuesday afternoon. She picked up the phone. Philip Mercer appeared in 4 minutes. He had clearly been told she was there. "Could we sit somewhere quiet?" Celestine said. They sat in a small meeting room off the lobby. Celestine set her bag down and folded her hands on the table and told Philip Mercer, in precise and unhurried terms, that as of approximately 90 minutes ago, she had completed the acquisition of Haas Hospitality Group, which made her the majority owner of 23 properties, including this one. Philip Mercer's face did something complicated. "I want to be clear," Celestine said, "that this conversation is not about Tuesday." He nodded, very carefully. "This conversation is about the next 6 months. I'm going to want to meet with your full management team. I'm going to want to see your HR incident documentation, your staff retention numbers, your guest satisfaction data going back 4 years. I have my own people who will be in touch about the operational review." She paused. "The staff you have here, Dara, Kevin, the concierge whose name is Jerome, they were excellent. I want that noted formally." Philip exhaled. "They are excellent." "I know," she said. "I watched." She stood to leave, and then she paused at the door because she was human, and because some things deserve to be said even when they don't need to be. "The cameras from Tuesday," she said. "I'd like copies." Philip nodded. "Not for anything legal," she said. "I want to give them to Preston Whitmore. I want him to have the opportunity to watch himself and decide what kind of man he'd like to be going forward." Philip looked at her for a moment. "You're not going to end his contract with the group?" She considered it. "Not today. But I am going to personally review the terms, and I am going to make sure that every property in this group has a very clear and very enforced policy about what happens when a guest treats staff or other guests the way he treated me on Tuesday." She picked up her bag. "And I'm going to make sure staff know they have the authority to act on it, without waiting for a manager, without calculating whether the guest is a Diamond Preferred member." She paused. "Nobody should have to calculate that," she said. "Not Kevin, not Dara, not anybody." She walked out of the meeting room and crossed the lobby and stepped into the elevator. 3 days later, Preston Whitmore received a package at his Atlanta office. Inside was a USB drive. On the USB drive was footage from 2 angles: lobby camera, front desk camera, of a Tuesday afternoon in September at the Hartwell Grand Hotel in Chicago. He watched it once. He watched it a second time. There was no note in the package. No letterhead, no demand, no threat. Just the footage, and his own face in it, and the entirely clear picture of exactly what he had done and how he had looked doing it. His assistant later said he sat at his desk for a long time after that, not making calls, not answering emails, just sitting. She didn't know what he was thinking. She didn't ask. The following week, Whitmore Capital Advisors received a letter from Haas Hospitality Group, now operating as Okafor Hospitality Partners, outlining a revised corporate travel policy and the new terms under which the account would continue, including a signed acknowledgement from all traveling employees that they had read and agreed to the guest conduct standards. Whitmore signed it. He mailed it back the same day. The operational review of the Hartwell Grand took 4 months. At the end of it, Celestine made 3 structural changes to the hotel's HR processes, increased the starting wage for housekeeping and front desk staff, and implemented what she called an authority to act policy, a single laminated card kept at every guest-facing station that listed the specific situations in which any staff member, regardless of seniority, had the right to intervene, escalate, or remove a guest without waiting for management approval. Kevin, who had been at the Hartwell for 14 months and had never been entirely sure that his judgment was trusted, kept his copy in his vest pocket. He never had to use it, which was exactly the point. Celestine did not do a press release about the acquisition. She did not give interviews about Tuesday in the lobby. She did not post anything. The story circulated anyway, the way stories do in industries where everyone knows everyone, passed from GM to GM, from regional director to regional director, with the particular velocity of a story that confirms something people have wanted to believe. That silence is not always absence, that stillness is not always defeat, that the woman standing at the front desk with water on her face might simply be waiting for the right moment. She usually is. She usually knows exactly how long she has to wait.